And we are live. Welcome to Modwent Aileron, a small little channel. Today I have a talk with Chrisiousity. Chrisiousity participated in a collab video about questions for the anti-SJWs, and within that she also posed a question whether we would like to discuss the situations men face in our current society. I'm going to give the word to Chrisiousity right after I finish this. Guys in the stream, in the hangout, in the chat, thank you for joining us. All I'm asking you is keep it clean. Chrisiousity, go ahead.
Hello, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. As I said in that original video, which seems like forever ago, but it really wasn't, you know, I have worked with men in the past. I've worked with men who had addiction issues. I've worked with men who've had been suicidal, who've been abused or sexually assaulted. So, you know, it's I think that in our society, men often have a different attitude towards asking for help for people, for reaching out for help for people. And I think that there's a lot of different ways that, as I said before, if we could get past some of the disagreements and values or in ideas that we have. For instance, you know, I may think one thing, you may think another thing about a different thing, but if we can put those things aside and talk about ways to work together, the ways that we can progress the issue, because right now we have a situation where there's a rising suicide rate among men, and this is, to me, this is something that can't just be accepted to go on while we sit around dickering over every little political thing. You know, we have to fix that first, and then we can, you know, we can maybe at the same time discuss other issues, but let's keep our eyes on the prize and on people being healthy and happy.
No, personally, I completely agree with you. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I found that we can't talk about men's issues is, and you guessed it, I'm going to say it anyway, feminism and the regressive left. Because as soon as we mention there are problems with men, either the response is going to be, yeah, but women, or, yeah, but you're advocating for violence against women, or you're spouting hate speech. I'm not saying you do this, but do you recognize that this happens?
Well, just in bringing up that men have issues.
Yes.
So so you've had the experience that you've said something like men are having suicide, the suicide rates are going up, and somebody said that you were engaging in hate speech. I don't understand that connection at all.
I don't understand the connection either, but yes, it has happened. It not in one of the videos or hangouts I did, but in one of the chats, for example, I did. I respond to a lot of videos, and sometimes people are like, yeah, but women have it worse. And okay, but if I then look at, okay, for every woman that commits suicide, roughly, I'm thinking 7. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm thinking 7 men commit suicide for every woman that commits suicide. Yeah, but that's just rubbish, and that's not true, and it's just hate speech. Yeah, I'm sorry, it is true. I don't think it's hate speech. It's a fact. It's not something we like, but it's something that happens. And very often, when we bring up male issues, it gets bogged down by, yeah, but women. For example, if we talk about rape statistics, we never mention male victims of rape. And once we do mention them, we get arguably contested because we're pitting victims against each other. And that's the funny thing. We're never allowed to talk about men being victim. We're allowed to talk about women being victim. We're not allowed to talk about men being victim. For example, I'm going to give you one last example, because this is maybe the clearest definition I can give you. We know that domestic violence is a huge problem. On this we agree, right?
Correct.
Okay. We know that this is roughly, it's not on perfect numbers, 60% to 40%. 60% female victims, 40% male victims in the US. Do you contest these numbers?
I think that they're a little, I don't contest them. They lack a little bit of nuance because I have looked into them. But
well,
but saying
it's roughly 60-40.
Yeah.
We also know that domestic violence is not always initiated by the man. Sometimes domestic violence is initiated by the woman, but men, on average, have bigger upper body strength. So where a woman can start the fight, men can finish it. If a man finishes the fight, the woman then gets relegated to the 60% because she is a victim. But, well, actually, everyone gets relegated to 60-40. But it's quite often that women initiate domestic violence. I'm not saying always, I am saying quite often. But those arguments aren't even interesting. If we look at the raw numbers of 60% of the victims are female and 40% of the victims are male, would you then also not assume that the shelters for men and women are roughly in the same numbers?
I think that they're not in the same
I know they're not, but would you not expect them to be?
In a vacuum, yes.
Fair enough.
In the reality of to be, and I find that this is based a lot on some gendered ideas that people have about men and women. You know, I've talked to my father, for instance, and talked about men being abused. Do you remember, who was it? Matthew? There was a YouTuber, Santoro, I wanted to say.
Yes. I forgot his name, but I know who you mean. Long, thin guy, makes list videos.
Right.
10 most important this, 10 most important that, stuff like that. I like his stuff, by the way, but yeah, I know who you mean.
Yep. So he had come out as a victim of abuse.
Yes.
By a woman, right?
Yes.
And I remember, you know, sort of just generally mentioning this to my dad at some point. Yes. And my dad, who's, I want to say that in some ways he's a very traditional guy. And
I already know where you're going, but continue.
So he said, so he just scoffs. He's like, puffed.
Yes, because he's not considered a real man, because...
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So there's this, in our society, there's this idea about men can't be victims of domestic abuse. Not really, they can't. And that's simply untrue, you know, and this is sort of one of the gendered expectations that we're trying to break down over time. It's very difficult because people have a very entrenched point of view about men and women and genders and how everybody's supposed to be and what everybody's supposed to be like, you know, and we see it in small ways and we see it in big ways.
I totally agree with you on that. The thing is, though, and his situation was paramount, because men often don't mention it when they are victims. So the fact that he came out already makes the situation special. Why? No,
I'm very glad. I'm very glad that he came out. I'm very glad that he shed some light on this issue. Are you aware of Against the Odds, the group that is sort of a combination group that we formed? We formed it on Facebook, and we've also made a YouTube channel, Against the Odds, and just recently we put out a couple of videos actually about abuse and sort of looking at men's abuse numbers and statistics and looking at their needs. And I also know that my friend Makaya has been assembling a list so people could go to his channel, which I'll try to remember to link to you, because he's been trying to assemble a list of shelters that people can go to if they need them. So a list of men's shelters or shelters that accept men. I know that there are some in my state.
Would you be surprised if I would say that I think less than 2%, but I'm going to say less than 5% of all the shelters in the Western world are for men?
I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't be shocked.
I'm sorry to hear that, because I am shocked that this is the case.
Yeah.
I am shocked because what we're saying is that if you're a woman and you're a victim, we will help you. But what we're also saying, if you're a man and you're a victim, well, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you a victim?
Right. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to gender roles and expectations, I think that we are starting to break out of it. But believe me, I wish I could be more surprised. But at this point, as a feminist, every day I hear people reciting these ideas to me that, you know, men are this and women are that. Men are this, women are that.
But it's not gender roles. I don't really like the word gender to begin with, but they're not gender roles. No one has the role to be a victim.
No, what I mean is the idea of the man as being the stronger, dominant, powerful one. For instance, there was, I'm gonna say, I'm trying to remember the name of the study, but there was a study about men and the sort of ideas that people have about men. Like what are we've heard of women's stereotypes, but what are stereotypes of men, right? So some of the stereotypes are that men are bad but bold, I think is what the guy ended up calling his study.
Do you know where that stereotype comes from?
Well, those stereotypes go back centuries.
No, they don't go back that far, to be honest. They go back, well, they do go back roughly 1.5, maybe a little bit more centuries, but not that far back.
I don't know.
Okay, then I'm going to give you another example. Do you know what the age is for a man or a boy to work in a coal mine?
Now?
No, back in the days. Well, still now in certain countries, unfortunately, but back in the days.
I know that they were certainly as young as 9, 10, 11.
10 years old, indeed. Do you know what the age is for a woman to be allowed in the coal mines, or a girl to be allowed to work in the coal mines?
I'm surprised they were. So I don't know.
You're right. You would be surprised if they were, because they weren't allowed to work in a coal mine.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, we already see, and we're talking about 1800 something, we already see, well, before that actually, we already see a segregation in the role of men and women.
Oh,
what is the first thing we see in this segregation? And there are more examples, but I always liked this example most. What do we see in the segregation of men and women in this situation? What we see is that one of the two is expendable and the other is not. Now, which one of the two is expendable according to this example?
I'm not going to agree with you on this idea that they were expendable, and that's why. Women were considered expendable in a different way, because
women were never expendable in the Western world. We can go as far back as the Roman Empire. The position of a woman was never expendable. They might not have the most powerful of positions, but they were never expendable.
I guess it depends on your definition of expendable, because certainly
you could afford to lose them.
The rates of death were very high for women in childbirth.
That's true, but that's nature. That's not something anyone could change.
And at the same time, the idea of women limiting their sexual, having control over or limiting their sexual getting pregnant was always a struggle.
It's never been really about control in the Western world, though. But yeah, no, I agree with you that the mortality rate for women giving birth was pretty high, and infant rate death on birth was pretty high too.
Yeah.
But that's not something men or women could do anything about. Actually, it has
Well,
been something
they
that
could
they've
have.
been trying to improve on ever since they started trying to improve on anything.
Well, and rightly so.
Fair enough. Yes.
But
But
but I wouldn't say that they were just women weren't given full capacity to do what they wanted to do, as far as having access to birth control, having knowledge of birth control,
that is
having
unfortunately not true.
I could
Even if we go back, as I said, to the Roman times, and since then forward, I mean, okay, during Christianity, the position of a woman got worse, which ended roughly, I'm going to say 18 and a little bit again. But yes, the position of poor people was terrible, and poor women had it bad. But then again, poor men had it bad too. But even during these periods of time, only one of the two was considered expendable.
see you label this expendability, and I just label it. I don't know that they were considered just, oh, it's a guy, throw him out. Like, that to me is what expendable means.
I know. And
And
that is
I
what
don't,
expendable means.
to me, that's not what was going on there. As part of a society, they were being, some men who were higher up on the hierarchy than other men did consider the lower men expendable in that
No,
sense.
I'm not saying higher men considered lower men expendable. I'm saying
But they
the
did. I mean, we're talking about even going back to feudalism.
Roman Empire is well before feudalism, but even in
Well,
that,
I know, but I'm not going to go back to the Roman Empire because I'm no expert on it.
okay,
So
well,
you can say Roman Empire did this, Roman
but
Empire did
okay,
that. That's fine.
then let's go. I mean, you know a little bit about the feudal empire of Europe.
Mm.
If we look at the position of women, they were still a protected. They were maybe a protected commodity, and I would be pissed to say that they were a commodity, because this is absolutely not true. But they were definitely a protected part of society, and men, and even in the feudal system, they were expendable. They were much more expendable during the feudal system than during the Roman era, to be honest. And how does this equate to what we know? Well, if we look at it quite simply, who was at the top of the feudal system?
Who's at the top of the feudal system?
Who's
Well, the king or the pope would have been at the top.
The king or queen, because you could have a queen, and indeed the pope from a Christian point of view. Under him, you would have dukes and whatever else titles people could get, and they would also be knights. What's a knight? A knight is a heavily armored soldier. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were set into, what did they used to say in the there are three types of people: those that work, those that pray, and those that fight.
Yes.
So they had that sort of stratification there.
Yes.
And of course they were talking about men generally, though women did, of course, have were part of the people that prayed, at least.
No, they weren't. They were part of the people that worked, though. But that's a thing that a lot of people seem to overlook.
Well, they were in nunneries. I mean, there were convents, and
there were, yes, and
people like Saint Teresa d'Avila, and
there were, but most women, just like most men, actually worked.
Yes.
Because the whole idea that women weren't allowed to work, I'm sorry, but in those days you either worked or you died starving. That's as simple as it went. I mean, I think roughly until let's say just about 1940, that's when single income households actually became viable. Before that, they weren't, unless of course you were rich. But then you're rich.
That was pretty rare.
Too. That's a completely different story. But if we look at the feudal system, knights were basically the highest normal people in a feudal system. I mean, they weren't ranked like a king or a duke or
Right.
etc., but they were still pretty high up there. What is the one thing a knight truly was?
The one thing a knight truly was?
What was the one thing a knight truly was?
A soldier?
Indeed. Now, what's the job of a soldier?
To fight.
To
To
die
win.
well.
That too, I suppose, if
The
that's
only job a soldier
necessary.
have is to die well. You
Oh,
prefer not to die, obviously, but when you go into battle, there is one thing that you can be 100% sure of. You can be 100% sure that in battle men die.
absolutely. Yeah.
There might be a chance you will not be one of them, but that's only a chance. What will most men do when they're defending an area?
When they're defending an area,
They are
what will
defending.
most men do?
For example, I'm defending a small hamlet. What's the first thing the defenders will do?
Build a wall?
No.
Well, they probably should build a wall.
The wall should have been built before they needed to defend it. But
okay, so you're saying this isn't planning to defend. This is somebody's coming.
If someone is coming, we have to act now. Right. What do we do?
Well, you're going to grab your... you're going to get your boots on and grab your weaponry.
Well, that's part of it. Yes, that is part of it. There's another part of it, though.
You throw it out there.
We're going to send away the women and the children.
I'm finding, not that this isn't interesting, but I'm kind of wondering where any of this is going. You know, I mean, I cannot change.
This is a mindset. No, you can't change the past. No one can.
The past.
No one can. We can only recognize it. And this is where I have a problem with feminism, because I feel feminism often doesn't recognize the past. What we see, and this goes back well before any society that we now know of. If we go back at the very beginning of Homo sapiens sapiens, and we go back even further to Homo erectus or the Neanderthal, Carlos Castreo knows a lot about this. Thank you, Carlos, in the stream. Hi there. Every society before any society we know of, the main goal was to protect the women. Because a society can only survive as long as there are women bearing children.
Well, all I can say is that we are not living in tribal lands anymore. And
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that. But
we need to address the modern world as modern people.
I agree with you on that as well. But I do need to bring this forth. Why? Because this is ingrained in us. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. It's genetically ingrained in us.
All right, so now you don't have proof of that. And I know you don't have proof of that.
I do have proof of that, actually.
Go ahead. Show me the chromosome.
What do you mean, show you the chromosome?
Show me the genetics that demonstrate this.
Okay, I will show you by an example.
No, I want to see it under a microscope. There's no example of genetics. There's a microscope, and then there's a key. This is the gene.
Do you know what they mean when people talk about?
This is how it is expressed.
Do you know what people talk about when they talk about your lizard brain?
Yes.
What is your lizard brain?
Your lizard brain, it's down at sort of the base of your skull towards the bottom, and it is the area of just pure instinct, what I think you would consider to be pure instinct.
Okay.
And it handles rage, protection, mate finding, hunger seeking. You know, I mean, it's your sort of basic.
It's your basics. Yes,
yeah.
Your basic instinct. So you know about this.
Yes.
Okay. Yet you asked me to prove about it.
Oh, I believe that there's a lizard brain there, right? Nobody is arguing that people don't have instincts.
Okay. Demcouver is saying something. Evolution does not equal genetics. Thank you, Demcouver. You are right. He's saying this in chat, by the way. Maybe I should not have said genetics, but certain behaviors is boiled into us. It's branded into us.
Mm.
For example, the flight and fight response.
Correct.
Some people have this, some people have the other. Would you be surprised if I would tell you that on average, men, even today, will stand on the breaches to defend a woman, even if they know it will kill them, as long as the woman has a chance to survive?
I'm sure some men would do that.
Most men would do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you could prove that, but I'm sure you could.
Because this is something that we have seen in nearly all of the wars in the last 100 years. So it's still part of us. At the same time, women will risk their life on average to save their child.
Mm.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So when I say a woman would do it, you're no problem with believing it or accepting it. But when I say a man would do it, you need proof.
I'm saying, would a man do it just to protect any woman? Or are you talking about his woman?
Any woman.
So there's, that is the distinction, I would
Well,
say.
there is a slight caveat. It has to be a woman of his own culture.
Yeah.
There is that distinction. But other than that, any woman of his own culture, he will try to protect. This is ingrained in men.
Well, then, yeah, in that case, I would say that.
For example, if a man walks the street and he sees a woman getting attacked, he is most likely to jump to her defense.
And I would hope that men or women would both do that. I don't know that, I think it depends on what culture they were raised in. You know, again, I'm wondering where we're going with this is, I guess, what I'm wondering.
Okay, I'm wanting to set the baseline. I want you to recognize that on average, men have ingrained in their system, ingrained in their personality, the desire to protect.
Okay.
This is not something men choose. This is something that's ingrained in them. Now, we see this, for example, when men stand up to defend feminists. I mean, we call them cocks. Well, I don't, but people do. But at the same time, I disagree with, I mean, if they are idiots, they're idiots. But the fact that they do what they do is basic. It's evolved within who they are. They are protecting women because that's what men do. Now, that there are women and men on both sides of the spectrum doesn't make much of a difference because they are protecting the women of the culture they choose to be part of. In this case, the culture is feminism.
So you don't think that they could just agree with the concepts?
Oh, no, they do agree with the concepts. That's why they're in the same culture.
Okay. But, you know, I mean, when it comes to what I see, this is what I see.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So I see any argument, right, where they're men and they're women and they're all arguing, right? Immediately, any male arguer on the side generally of the feminist is going to be called a white knight, is going to be called a cuck, is going to be called this, is going to be called that. And it's just...
Yes, that's bullshit.
It's bullshit.
Yeah,
but I mean, I see it all the time.
I might think they're idiots, but then I think they're idiots based on what they're defending, not on who they are.
Yeah, I mean, I will argue in support of a guy. Nobody calls me a white dame, you know.
No, indeed.
But what I'm arguing is the concepts, because I'm not really, you know.
No, I agree with you on that. On this, I totally agree. It's stupid to say that what we now call white knights, and I use the term white knights because it's a good description. I don't like the word cock. Well, maybe I use it in a derogatory term sometimes, but I disagree with the term because what they are doing is basically evolved behavior. They are protecting the women of their tribe, of their culture.
See, I don't like to make these kinds of assumptions of people's motivations or what their internal processes are unless they're going to say it.
There are no internal processes in this. This is what I'm trying to tell you. This is your lizard brain. This is automatic. This is what you do. It's like breathing.
We have a lizard brain, but we also have a higher cortical functions that
we do.
direct.
But we have
what
to
we
recognize,
do, we make decisions.
But what we have to recognize is why we make these decisions and why we choose. And a lot of people do not take the time to see the difference between these steps. So they feel, and this is more than just knowing and thinking about it. This is really just feeling. They feel that they need to come to protect someone. And that's when they stand up. I'm coming to stand up to protect women because I'm a feminist. Everyone should be a feminist, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. The culture behind it, in this case, feminism, isn't really to blame. So I'm not trying to blame feminists for men behaving like this or women behaving like this, but I'm talking about men mostly now. It's just the culture. And these men align themselves with this culture. And when this culture is under attack, the lizard brain kicks in. They're not listening to arguments. They're not listening to facts.
I find this very rude towards
Really?
a lot of the men that I know who are very intelligent, rational male feminists that I know who are
this goes
thoughtful.
Beyond. This goes beyond all of that. I'm not immune from this either.
Nobody's immune from their lizard brain, but that doesn't mean it is one. You can't just take any particular discussion, argument, conversation that people have and say, oh, this person here is just doing X because of X. You know, we have very complicated neurology, and it's not an absolute this and absolute that at any moment.
There is, unfortunately, in this case, rather, well, you're right, it's not a complete absolute, but there is some strength in this. And how do we recognize this? Because once we start talking facts, people will respond emotional and not factual.
Well, that's people. Everybody does that.
Everyone does that. So you're going to start reacting emotionally based on which side you feel your culture is that you need to protect. You have to be specifically aware of your own behavior to remedy your own behavior. As I said, this is something that affects me too. And I'm an anti-feminist, but I cannot constantly, continuously bash feminism for, well, I can actually, I do, but I have to recognize when they do something good as well. Or when a woman who claims to be a feminist does something good. Maybe I should put it like that.
All right.
No, but do you recognize the nuances in this?
Everybody has biases. Everybody has mindsets.
Indeed.
Politics is based around values, and values have a level of subjectivity and emotionality to them.
Yes.
So but that doesn't mean that we should assume, you know, I'm not going to assume that a person's lizard brain is directing them to a certain political point of view unless you show me a brain scan. I mean, I'm just not going to make that jump.
Okay, well, fair enough. You don't have to make that jump. I can't prove it because there is no brain scan that can show you that, because simply we can't scan our lizard brain that well. And you're partly correct in saying, well, it's not that black and white, because it isn't. You're right. But as soon as we stop talking about factual and we start talking about emotions, you can be assured that it's your lizard brain talking and not your cognition.
Well, I can't agree with that either, because that is also not necessarily the case. It's not all.
That is not the case.
All emotions are not all from the lizard brain.
No, but as soon as emotions are being used to overrule facts, then they are.
I think that your grasp of neurology is a little shaky.
Unfortunately, on this, I'm 100% sure. Actually, it is my job, so I kind of like to think that I know a little bit about this.
You're a neurologist.
I'm not a neurologist. I'm a sociotherapist.
Okay.
Psychiatry is my line of work.
Uh-huh.
So
no,
I'm sorry. I didn't want to. I didn't want to use hang yourself. I didn't want to make you look bad on this, because there is actually something where I'm going to. It's not about whether the male feminists are wrong or whatnot. What I'm trying to show you is the mindset of a man. Because I'm not blaming feminists on this. I think feminism has done a lot of things bad, but this is not one of them. This is the mindset of men. The men, on average, will defend their culture. And within Western culture, we have lots of different cultures, feminism being one of them. Men will, beyond logic, beyond cognition, defend their culture. What happens is that men will also defend their culture, even though somewhere deep inside they may realize, wait a second, I'm wrong. Because that's what they do. They will try to be level-headed about it, but at the same...
So do you think women should make more of the decisions then?
No, and I'll tell you why in a second. Well, actually, no, I'll tell you right away. Women-based decisions making mostly, on average, not all, hashtag not all, but on average, on emotion. Where men, on average, make their decision based on cognition, on facts. We need a balance of the two of them. So if we have men working from emotion, then the balance is going towards the women. Which doesn't have to be a negative thing, but if we're talking about something like feminism, I personally think it's a bad thing. But at the same time, if we go all the way to fact, we lose sight of emotion, which is also not a good thing. We need a balance.
But you just said that men, when their culture is under attack, become emotional. So you're talking in circles here.
No. I'm sorry. It's not that they become emotional. Their decision-making becomes emotional. They will try to cognitively explain why they do this, but they will not take facts into consideration if those facts counter the facts that they just brought up.
Yeah, you can't prove any of this shit. This is all garbage. I mean, I'm sorry, this is sexist garbage, and you could say, unfortunately, this and unfortunately that. Okay, but I know that you can't prove it.
Actually, I can, but I'm not going to bother because
okay.
No, this is the thing. I work in psychology. Yeah.
Well, good for you.
One moment. No, let me finish, because at the same time I'm going to attack psychology right now. So this is not me saying I talk from authority, but at the same time, I'm going to tell you why psychology in itself will never be a good model to explain anything. Because it's consensus. If we look at psychology, if we look at sociology, it's consensus. You can never truly prove something from consensus. So I'm going to agree with you on that it cannot be proven, nor can it be disproven, funny enough. And
perhaps not, but it's... Oh, sorry, hang on.
I'll wait.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Real life comes first.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to try to prove you right or wrong, or not going to prove myself right or wrong, because the thing with sociology and psychology, they're theories, they're philosophies, they're not facts. I mean, psychiatry, yes, that's a fact. Psychology, no, I'm sorry, it's not a fact. It's a philosophy, and it's my job. Some of my colleagues hate me for saying it, but unfortunately, this is the case. They're not facts. I mean, if we look at the psychology of men in the Western world and we compare it to the psychology of men in the Asian world And some of the Asian world is Western, some of the Asian world isn't. Or we compare the Middle Eastern man with the European man, we see a lot of difference. So there are some things that are the same, but we see a lot of difference. So psychology cannot explain that. Well, it tries to, based on sociological models, but at the same time, there is no biological explanation for it.
All right. Well, let me try to get this conversation on track then. What would you suggest would be a good way of approaching the male suicide rate, for instance? Where would you see some useful interventions?
We need to stop the Western world from becoming more and more gynocentric. And this is a long process, but the Western world has been gynocentric for more than a few hundred years now. And everyone is telling us that this is not the case, but if we look at it factually, it is.
Uh-huh. I just don't see that. But
okay,
you know,
I'm sure you've heard on the many talks that you've been on and the many people you talked with that there was this disaster called the Titanic. People had to go to the lifeboat.
Yes.
Women and children first.
Mm-hmm.
You don't recognize this as one of the reasons?
Well, it was rich women and children first. Let's be honest; they let the poor ones die.
Listen, they let the poor men die too. That's
yeah.
I mean, the rich before the poor. But
I'm saying that there are, but I've agreed with you that in as much as there are attitudes that women have to be protected, and I don't like those attitudes.
No, I agree with you on that, because there's something wrong with that, because there are plenty of strong women out there. And our society already makes it so that men don't have to physically protect women on every day. I mean, even if we go back to the feudal periods, even if we look at the feudal system, for example, let's take Great Britain, in England back in the day, there was this rule about shouting out. If a woman or a man was being attacked, they were by law not so much required, but assumed to shout out for help. And anyone who heard it was by law required to help. Especially if it was a woman, funny enough.
I just don't find that this equals a gynocentric world.
Okay, that's okay. You don't have to think the world is gynocentric. I can give you other examples how in the Western world, even today, we live in a gynocentric world. Men will do anything they can to protect women. Men will not do anything to protect men. But look at the current laws we have just about everywhere in the Western world. Can we agree that female genital mutilation is a bad thing?
Yes.
Can we agree that it's illegal in most of the Western world, if not all of the Western world?
Yes.
So can we then agree that genital mutilation is a bad thing?
Yes.
Then why is male genital mutilation allowed?
Male genital mutilation is allowed because of religious ordinances, which were started by men a long time ago.
But this is true for female genital mutilation too.
Yes.
So why is it bad for one but good for the other?
Dude, stop interrupting. But they aren't our religious traditions. Were we raised to believe that female genital mutilation was fine and dandy? If that was a part of our Judeo-Christian heritage, the same way that it's a part of the heritage of people in Nigeria and whatnot, then we would think differently. The other reason that in America it is so prevalent is because for a long time they believed that masturbation really was a danger to the men of their time. And it was believed that circumcising men would keep them from this extremely dangerous habit, which would cause them to be crazy and blind and mad and everything else. So it was actually put into place based on a superstition, really, a medical superstition, let's put it. But it was put into place in an effort to protect men from their own urges, which it's nonsense, but that is the case.
Okay,
you can look it up.
There are two things that are wrong with that. One,
Yeah.
male genital mutilation has nothing to do with Judeo-Christianity. Scotch McGuinness in the chat is saying that the Egyptians already had it. Fair enough. I'm going to say the Aboriginals also have it in Australia.
Yeah, they may well. I'm not saying it's only from Judeo-Christianity, but
okay. Female genital mutilation is also not only from certain cultures. We have seen it even in the West.
Mm-hmm.
But smart men recognized how it's a bad thing. And as you said yourself, I mean, even in the West, we once thought it was a good thing, but now we recognize that it's not.
Yeah, culture, as you've said before, is a tough thing. Emotions get involved and biases are involved. And a lot of people, you know what, I think for the same reason that spanking and sparing the rod spoils the child continues to be a problem. Even though we have the data, we have the studies, right? That you don't abuse your children to expect better behavior from them.
No, I agree with you on that.
People are still, they do it. And part of the reason is because their parents did it. And their parents' parents did it. You know, I mean, it's...
Well, in the Netherlands, for example, it's now by law illegal to hit your children.
It's not in America, but
I know. I'm not sure if it's the best way to go, but I understand where it's coming from. And personally, I agree with that. So this is once again an example of where we know new things, therefore we adjust our culture. Now, we did this on female genital mutilation. Why are we not doing this on male genital mutilation?
I don't know that we did this because we didn't have a widespread culture of it in the Judeo-Christian tradition.
It depends on how far back you go, but yes, we did.
Oh, okay, sure. When?
It's a long time ago. We're talking about pre-medieval. In certain Christian areas, especially around the Middle East, it was quite normal. We're talking roughly Roman time again, a little bit before that.
In certain areas, so it wasn't something that was universal.
It's roughly completely the Middle East, the Mediterranean area. In the Germanic countries, not so much, but in India, for example, in African areas, it was quite normal. Basically, the same cultures where it's still normal now, but they changed from being Christian to whatever they are now. And before they were Christian, they were something else. These are things that are cultural, but not religious. But when a religion takes over, they also expand into the culture, and then they adopt part of that culture as part of the religion.
Exactly. So, I mean, So
within Christian culture, it was, I mean, if we took at Judeo-Christianity, within Judeo-Christianity, female genital mutilation was used.
At some points in a certain degree, and in some places.
In the areas.
So it was never codified. Let's put it that way.
I'm not quite sure what you mean with codified, to be honest.
It was never put in as like you know, when the Nicene, what, I'm bad with words sometimes.
The Council of Nicaea.
Right.
When they started to give the Bible an overall, which was roughly in the year 300.
Right. And in places, in times and places like that, when they were really setting things down and setting things up, it was never like, you've got to do this, right?
No, not during that period of time, no. But that's 300 years after Christianity basically got started.
Yeah, and I'm not saying no Judeo-Christian groups or places ever had it, but it was never an overwhelming, like, as a Christian, you have to do this. In fact, they had gotten away from even male.
The Christians at first did get away from it. Judaism still has male genital mutilation. They went away from female genital mutilation as well, but they kept male genital mutilation.
Well, they didn't keep it consistently either, is my understanding.
Most of the time. I won't say perfectly, but most of the time, yes, they did. Unfortunately. But I mean, I can't blame anyone now. As you said earlier, this is something in the past. We did it then, so it's something we should change now. It's silly to say, well, we did it then, therefore we should do it now still.
Right.
This is something we agreed on, right?
Yes.
This is something that went wrong in the past. We shouldn't keep making the same mistakes.
Correct. I'm totally in favor of that anyway.
So should we abandon male genital mutilation?
Oh, absolutely.
Then why don't we speak together on this? Why is it that whenever something like this is being brought up, often the conversation is being brought back to female genital mutilation, when female genital mutilation is actually forbidden? Even though there are now people talking about how they want to allow female genital mutilation for certain cultures, which I hope will never happen. But that's beside the point.
Yeah. No, I sure. I mean, I have spoken about, I do not agree with male genital mutilation. I don't agree. I think circumcision for people of age who want to,
yes,
18 and over, that's different.
Yeah, if you can get that tattoo, then okay, you can chop off your dick all you want, mate. I don't care. You're a mature man. Do what you want.
Right.
Same for women, by the way.
Yeah. Ugh, but yeah.
I can't think of it either. I mean, mind blown that people would do it. Thank God in this country, genital mutilation for women is forbidden, and for men is, well, it's not forbidden, but it's, thank God, not common as it is, for example, in America. But yeah, one of the reasons why male genital mutilation is still legal is cultural, because there are certain cultures within our society that do this.
Yeah, and I don't think that they're necessarily going to give it up easily either. But
I don't think it's something we should ask them to give up. I think it's something we should tell them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's if we look at the position of men.
Oh no, I agree with you. I don't think you should be allowed to do that to an infant, a baby, because that's in your religion, any more than I think you should be allowed to cut their earlobes off.
Well, I'm glad we agree on that. I really am.
There you go.
No, seriously, I'm not even joking. But one of the reasons why we see a lot of problem with men is that, on average, our society looks at men to hold the line, protect, be there, provide, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And in a culture that preaches equality, men don't get a lot of equality. For example, and I'm not even, because we started about male suicide, and I have always kept this in the back of my head to come back to this. If we look at male suicide, a lot of men commit suicide often because they feel there is no other way out.
Mm-hmm.
Can we agree on this? Suicide is basically a last-ditch effort because society or the life that the person has is too painful to continue.
Yeah.
So the last way to get rid of that pain is committing suicide.
Yeah.
Okay. That then means that on average, men feel more pain, emotional pain, than women, on average.
So now that you're going to get into a weird area.
I know.
And
if we look at attempts of suicide, who do you think attempts suicide more, men or women?
Women attempt it more. Men are
Indeed.
successful more.
Indeed.
Men use different
techniques.
Yes. But this becomes a very complicated and difficult thing to start to parse out. Is this really going to be helpful to anybody for us to sit here and argue about it? Like, if you sit here and argue, I'm going to point out that men use guns more for everything. Men buy more guns.
Yeah,
men
but
hold more guns.
that doesn't explain
guns in crime.
That doesn't explain why men are more likely to commit suicide in Europe, where guns are not even into the equation.
I don't know as much about Europe.
Owning a gun is not natural here. You don't have the right to own a gun.
Yeah.
So most men don't own a gun. Yet still most men, sorry, not most men, but still more men commit suicide than women. There are, of course, other ways to commit suicide than guns.
Yes. But I do know more about sort of America, because that's where I have done the things that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's a lot of this there. There's a lot of, I mean, I have had men actually tell me that they did not seek help for their drug and alcohol problems. They did not seek for the help for their psychiatric problems because they didn't want to lose their guns. They were afraid that someday somebody might put a law in and then they would lose their gun.
Yeah, I'm going to even take it one further, because what you just said is basically the bottom line of the problem. Men didn't seek help because they were fearing there would be consequences.
Mm.
This is truly the bottom line of it all. Why don't men seek help? Because they fear there might be consequences. Now, why do men fear that there will be consequences if they seek help?
For a psychiatric or a drug and alcohol? Because there are. I mean, there could be. I don't know. There aren't, in America, there's not so much for guns, because we'll give you a gun if you're a toddler. We'll give guns out. Don't get me started on guns, but
yeah, I'm not.
We don't go there.
I'm not in favor nor against it. It's simple. I live in the Netherlands. We don't have guns. Done.
Yeah. But there is a significant amount of stigma. There's a significant amount of problems around. Less around, I guess it's getting better about drug and alcohol addiction, but it's still there's still a significant stigma there. And with certain mental illnesses, psychiatric illnesses, there's huge stigma, huge.
Yes. And women on average are more likely to ask and get help than boys, unfortunately.
I think that's fairly across the board, that women are, it's not even just on psychiatric issues. I think that women are more likely to, men are more likely to see it as an admission of weakness to ask for help, for instance.
I guess you're right on that. Yes, it might be considered, well, it might be, it's most likely that it's considered to be a sign of weakness. For example, we have many of social tests out there that if we see a woman crying in the street, people will be aware and try to figure out what's going on.
Absolutely.
When we see a man crying in the street, on average, people laugh at him.
Yeah, that's awful. You know, I definitely think men should be allowed to express a full range of emotions.
Well, I'm not even talking about whether men should be allowed to express a full range of emotions, because I truly believe that men do. We just express them different than women because men and women are different, both biologically and mentally.
Mm.
And there is no good or bad in this. I mean, honestly, the whole idea that men and women should be the same is, to me, ridiculous. They should be equal, but there's a difference between equal and the same, in my humble opinion. Am I still on board with you on that one, or?
Probably, but probably we have a significant amount of difference in what we consider those specific times when, you know, for instance, I think that, how do I explain this? Sorry. I think that men and women obviously have some biological differences that require different health interventions, for instance. So certainly on that, then I would agree. But I don't see, I see a lot more flexibility and a lot more adaptability when it comes to gendered concepts, gendered roles, gender within culture, how it's understood from people.
Okay. The differences are more than just cultural, to be honest. There are biological differences that are so big that this is something we get lied about a lot. I not too long ago, I watched a video of a female neuropsychologist who was talking about how the brain of the man and the woman is the same. And I'm like, you're a neurobiologist. You should know factually that's a lie. The way our brains are built up, the way our bodies are built up, are actually quite different. We're still equals. I mean, you're a human, I'm a human. We have two eyes, we have two ears, on average, a nose, 2 feet, 2 legs, humanid. But there are strong differences as well, biologically speaking, emotionally speaking. There are strong differences. The differences should not set us aside. They should complement each other. Are we still on agreeing on that?
No.
You don't think that the differences of men and women should complement each other?
Whether the differences should complement each other or whether or not it's more of like you can't, other than a difference, you can't look at a man's brain in a vat or a woman's brain in a vat and just say, oh, that one's a boy brain and that's a girl brain.
Yeah, actually you can. I'm sorry, but you actually can.
Oh, bullshit.
No, you can.
I gotta call bullshit on you.
You can. There are physical differences between a male brain and a female brain.
Men tend to be slightly bigger, but you know, because men are bigger. But beyond that,
there are still a few more differences than that. Yes, there really are.
There's a thicker corpus callosum in women, but it's not. It's not.
Did you not notice that you already named 2 things that are different, and yet still you say they're not different?
I'm not saying they're not different. I'm saying that these are within a range, right? So it's not as simple as just I'll toss you a brain, you take a quick look at it and say, oh, this is a boy brain, this is a girl brain. It's not. They're a lot more the same than they are different. There are some minor differences in size that people aren't entirely sure what the hell that means. You know, I mean, even if you talk about oh, what is his name? Who is that that scientist who has the best hair in all of science? It's white and curly and puffy, that guy.
I'm sorry, that's not one of the things I usually pay attention to.
He has fantastic hair. Somebody should be able to know who he is.
A scientist with good hair, guys, go on.
He is one that believes that there are some differences, right? He's one that is on the side that there are differences in at least he thinks of them more as, he'll talk about them as differences statistically, you know,
Fair enough.
sort of within a statistical range, you know. So for instance, what he'll say is, there are books that are published in the United States, right?
Mhm.
And they're called the Darwin Awards. It's pretty rude, but yeah, these are books of people who died in stupid ways, doing something completely ridiculous and stupid. And what he is, so he'll say, or he has said, that men are always going to be the predominant risk takers who
Yes.
do stupid, risky things
Yes.
and get
Well,
themselves killed.
yes.
You know, on average, again,
Yeah.
he's talking about a statistical
we-
average,
we-
not
we
an absolute one or the other.
This is the same thing that on average, if we look at, for example, the IQ scale on men and women, men tend to, on average, be at the dumb side more often than women, and men are at the smartest side way more often than women. But in the middle, the average IQ, women score higher and men score lower.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that there aren't smart women. I mean, Madame Curie is basically single-handedly, well, almost single-handedly, responsible for everything we know about radiology. She was a woman.
But here we're talking about imperfect measurements of imperfect things that.
No, we're talking about averages. That's the problem with averages.
Yeah. But even IQ scales can change.
They do change.
They
Constantly.
fluctuate. So we're not looking at.
On average, you can still say that men score on the low end of the IQ scale and on the high end of the IQ scale way more than women do. And women, on average, score in the middle way more than men do. So finding a man with an IQ of 120 isn't that special. Finding a woman with an IQ of 120 becomes more special because usually they're not there. Well, wait a second. 120 is a little bit on the high end of average. So let's say 150.
I think your IQ tests themselves are questioned.
Definitely. I think they're useless, but that's a
and
story altogether.
There's a good reason for them to be questioned. But I mean, we're looking at
the differences between men and women,
defining intelligence and defining how we measure intelligence. And brains are neuroplastic, right? They change, they develop. I can decide to change my brain and do it. You know what I mean?
No, you can't. You can
it's not quite like I just decide to do it.
No, you can change you can change your think patterns, but you can't change your brain.
Well, that's not true either, because I mean, people can have an injury to a brain area and then their brain will change to work around that.
That's not your choice. That's your brain's choice. That's your body's choice. That's not your choice.
Yes.
You can't do this.
So so I shouldn't have said it that way, as if I decided to do that.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is sometimes it's just your brain does it, and sometimes it's your effort.
No, it's never your effort. It's either your brain will make on those new pathways or it will not.
Yeah, but you have to, there are times when they, for instance, send you to certain types of therapy in order to try to help make those connections.
Those therapies are not meant to help you make those connections. Those therapies are mostly meant to support you during those phases, because it is quite stressful. Knowing who you are and who you are going to become is really scary to people. They are frustrated because they lost certain capabilities they know they had, but they don't have anymore. And you have to deal with all those frustrations and all those anxieties, because the more balanced and neutral you are, the better your body will respond.
I wasn't talking about like talk therapy. I'm talking about like
I know you're talking about physical therapy.
Yeah.
Same thing though, trust me.
No, I don't.
I know you don't. Doesn't change the facts, unfortunately. This is not This is.
I mean, you like to throw out that it's the fact. Okay.
Fair enough. You don't have to believe me. By all means,
I
don't.
don't.
The thing is, though, by changing the way we think, by the way we act, we give our body more chance to repair certain neural damage.
Yes.
And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Then you
Correct.
still have to accept that what you've lost is gone. We see this, for example, with people
Yes.
getting brain injury from car accidents or whatnot. But we also see this from people restoring after a TIA or a brain hemorrhage.
Yeah. Yes. No, I've worked with I worked with some men who have had these issues. I worked with a man who had been shot in a robbery in his brain. It was really sad. And I've worked with men and women who've had like car accidents, and yeah, you don't know what's going to happen.
No, that's the most thing. And yes, there are ways to make people help them create certain pathways, but
Right.
on average, the creation of acceptance and rest is an important part of that. It's really an important part of that. And it's not only based on talking, it's also based on, it can be based on something as silly as trying to walk.
Right.
And then if you eventually are able to walk again, that in itself is, well, it can be paramount. It really can. But on average, because going back to what's the difference between men and women, if we look at men, they are not as easy to ask for help because society looks down on men who do. And this is not something just men do. This is something society does.
Yes, I would agree.
And therein lies the main problem. Do you have any idea of what age that starts?
Of looking down on men for crying?
On looking down on
What do
men
you
for their
mean?
behavior. Well, let's say crying. On looking down on men for crying, or males for crying, to make it a little bit wider.
So I know that treating men and women differently, it's, according to some, starts at the very moment you're born. You know, there's men and women who have the same APGAR scores. I don't know if they're called APGAR scores in Dutch, but
no, I can't remember, but they're not called APGAR. No.
Yeah, right. So, but you know what I'm talking about. They look at you and they say, "This is," you get their alert, and they can do this, and this is happening.
How sharp they are, and how aware they are, and etc.
Right.
Et cetera.
So, boy babies and girl babies that have identical APGAR scores, but they'll be described differently by sort of, "Oh, look at that big strong boy," or "Look at that pretty little girl," and there's really no difference. And also, if you see, there are videos where they'll show like a toddler who you can't really tell, but they'll say, "Oh, that's little Amy," or "That's little Jake."
I totally agree. I mean,
and they will describe the same exact behaviors depending on whether it's
different values.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's, to me, that's bullshit. So yes, I totally agree with you on that. That's bullshit. I mean, we have a small boy here. Most of his clothing are clothes of his niece when she was born. Do I give a fuck? No, he's a boy. I know he's a boy. His clothing doesn't make him a girl.
Right, correct.
So, and his behavior is, however, very different. I mean, my son is now 15, 16 months old. His behavior is very different than a girl of the same age. But at the same time, they are both still babies, so they do have certain things that they do the same. But there are certain things that they do differently. He is far more physically active than a girl of his age would be. But a girl of his age would learn certain cognitive things faster than he does. So, for example, if I look at the daughter of my best mate, she's already talking. He's not. She's already playing with dolls in a way he can't. But if we look at a physical thing, I mean, he's walking a lot faster than she is. He's actually running. So they develop differently. There's no inequality in it. It's different.
I would have to see some fairly solid evidence of that, because it's not my understanding.
Well, maybe the example I just gave you is purely, how do you call it?
Anecdotal?
Anecdotal, thank you. On average, I know it's not, but maybe let's assume that it is. Then I would still say he is not worth more. Well, he's worth more to me, but purely based on societal norms, I don't think he's better or worse than she is. They just do things differently. Can we say that they are both equal in value, but they are different?
Those two kids, sure.
Mm-hmm. Even if we're not going to say this is true for all boys or all girls, then we can still say that, right?
Right.
Could we still say it if it were true for all boys and all girls? That they could be different, but they were still equal.
Yes.
So we can say that.
Mm-hmm.
Then what's preventing us from saying that?
That's not true.
It's not true.
It's not true for all boys and all girls. It just isn't.
Okay. Okay. So if a boy is more boisterous than a girl, can we say that on average boys are more boisterous than girls?
If a boy is more boisterous?
No, on average. All boys, all girls, boys are on average more boisterous than girls.
Show me the evidence of that.
Okay. Do we... I have to look everything up then. I can do that, no worries. But I'm trying to make this move along a little bit. Can we agree that boys, let's say till the age of 12, have a different physiological build and the way that their body expends energy than girls do?
I'm not really an expert on pediatrics, but I guess that they have. I mean, I think that after puberty is when the bigger changes come.
No, actually, it already starts from birth. I mean, look at boys. Boys, on average, need more food intake than girls of the same age. Why do you think that boys need more intake of food than girls of the same age?
Really? Can you find me something that is gonna show me this? Because I mean, that's just not, like, as a mother, this is not. And
you have a boy and a girl?
I have boys. I have 3 boys.
So you don't.
But
have
I also, my sister has girls. My sisters-in-law have girls. Like, I always found, again, that it was based on the person. My middle son will eat you out of house and home. My first son, I didn't know how he survived. He hates food. He hated food.
There are differences.
So I mean, it's very like, when I go into the pediatrician, he doesn't hand me the boy list of foods to eat or the girl list.
No, there are no boy list and girl list. There is just calories.
He's like, this is how much you should be feeding a child of this size. So,
roughly.
I mean, if there's this difference, I have to see it. I'm sorry, I'm just too skeptical to just.
Let me see. I should have this somewhere. So I'll see if I can find it real fast. It's too much stuff on my screen, unfortunately. Well, we do know, however, that once you're mature, men and women have a different intake in food, right? We can agree on that.
Absolutely. Okay.
Because women on average need 1,500 calories, and men on average need 2,000 calories. Yes.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
There's very different physiological stuff that goes on.
Indeed, that already starts at birth. The reason why this is because men the physiology is more based on expending energy to create muscle mass, and therefore their brain also works differently. And for women, their energy goes into different things, but not so much in creating muscle mass. Doesn't mean that you can't have a strong woman, but on average, a strong woman will never be as strong as a strong man. We can agree on that, right?
Yes, whatever. Yes.
Okay. I'm still looking for that bullshit. Yeah. The thing is,
you're looking for the bullshit.
No, you want proof that boys need more food than girls. Well, at the same time, we more or less agreed on it already, but we agreed on a sidetrack.
Yeah, we agree at it, and at least once they've sort of hit the age of puberty. Once that's sort of
it's before that. It's before that already. But never mind. When you have boys, right?
Yes.
What age are they, if I may ask?
I have a real range. So I have he's about to be 3, and I have he's 7, and I have one who's in his early 20s.
Okay, so that's a rather big range.
Yes.
Can I ask you about your boy of 20?
Sure.
When he went to school, can you still remember that?
Oh, when he went to primary school?
No, kids. When he, I don't know how the schools are called in America. Primary is higher school, higher education, or what? No, when he was about 5 or 6 years old, and he went to school.
Okay. Yes.
Can you remember picking him up after school?
Yes.
Was he active or not? Was he boisterous?
No.
Excited? No, he wasn't.
Yeah, he was never a very excitable kid.
No, fair enough. I believe you.
So my middle son is definitely.
Okay.
He's probably right now moving around somewhere, but it's very hard to keep him.
I was hoping to use. I was hoping this would also be true for your older son, but okay, let's go to your 7-year-old, right?
Okay.
So when he comes back from school, he's more energetic. He has a lot of energy to expend.
He's just a very energetic kid.
Okay.
All the time.
All the time. On average, not completely true, but on average, this is true for nearly all boys. What do we see in our current society? And we've seen this for more than 40 years now. That when children come home and they're excited and they're energetic, parents consider this a problem.
Well, I don't think in the United States I would be very much. I feel like they're not given enough physical outlets in the U.S.
Yes, I agree with you. This is not only true in the U.S., by the way. This is true in the whole of the fucking Western world, in my humble opinion. But
yeah, I think that they need a lot more physical outlets that sort of balance out the long school days and give them.
Would you be surprised if I were to say that this is more true for boys than for girls?
I would doubt you.
Okay, you would doubt me. Well, in fact, this is more true for boys than it is for girls. And we see this because when girls get picked up by their parents from school, on average, they are less energetic than boys are. Which, on average, there will always be exceptions. On average, boys need to expend their physical energy. Where girls can sit in a school bank and actually get taught lessons, boys are difficult to grab attention from.
Okay. Are you going to provide...
Yeah, I'm going to do that now.
Okay. This is starting to get painful.
Yeah, that's okay. I have to do it via the interwebs though, because I can't find it on my... let me see. What we see, for example, and I'm going to talk whilst I'm looking for the information. What we see is that there is this diagnosis called ADHD or ADD.
Yes.
They're both different. They're almost the same, but what we see is that ADHD is something predominantly diagnosed on boys.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm trying to find out.
And I have also, I do have issues with the way that the psychiatric community looks at and diagnoses
ADHD.
younger children.
Yes, okay. On this, we then are probably completely in agreement.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to figure out whether there are plenty of studies, but I have to look all through them. Okay, I can't find the one that I can't find the statistic I want to show you. I have worked with people with ADHD. I mean, in my current work, I often work with people with ADHD.
Yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Or
No,
that
but roughly 70%, easily 70% of all people with ADHD are wrongfully diagnosed.
Yeah.
You agree with me on that?
I don't know what the percentage is, but I would think that that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, then in that case, I'm going to stop looking for proof. Because this is the point I was trying to make. What we see is that boys often are considered to be too excitable or whatnot, and they don't fit our current schooling systems anymore. Because we used to, when we were younger, have more physical behavior at school, so there was more time to run around and play games and whatnot. But throughout the years, that has changed to a more direct schooling system where we all sit in the school benches and wait for the class to end. And for boys, this is particularly hard. Some girls have a problem with this, but on average, this is a bigger problem for boys. Then the boys go home. They still have a lot of energy to expend. They expend it at home. Parents feel that their kids are too bolsterous and too active, etc., etc. They go to the doctor. The doctor says, okay, ADHD, here you have a pill. He'll calm down.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually happening. We can agree that this is actually happening, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. This is a problem. We try to tell our boys how they should behave. And based on what example do we want our boys to behave? On how the girls behave. Because girls, on average, when they get home, they are not as bolsterous as boys.
I certainly hope we're not telling the boys to go act like the girls. But
unfortunately, that is kind of what we're doing. It's kind of funny. 2 weeks ago, there was a huge article in the Dutch newspaper that the Dutch Minister of Education kind of admitted that there is a problem with our schooling system for the youngest kids. There is a problem with our schooling system because it fails for kids of minorities, so kids from other cultures, kids with learning disabilities, and boys. And it's actually said like that. I mean, I would say boys is like 50% of school. If there is a problem with boys, then there's a big problem with our schools. But the worst thing of it is that we've already known this for more than 20 years. But as soon as someone tries to change it, as soon as someone tries to make it more equal for boys and girls once again, they are often met with a lot of resistance. Now, fortunately, in the Netherlands, there are a few schools trying to do something differently. They are now at least 1 hour a day going to try to run with their kids. I
think that will make a huge.
I agree.
I agree. I think that
it will not be compulsory, but it will be, how do you call it? A little bit more than just voluntary.
Encouraged, perhaps?
Encouraged, thank you. Better word, way better word. So yes, it will be encouraged. This is something that has been proven to work throughout, actually throughout history. How do I know this has been proven to work? In America, you have universities for military personnel, right? I think West Point is a university as well, right?
Yes.
So when you go off of West Point, you have a university degree, and you're an officer of the U.S. Army, right?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that just because I
So
didn't
you have a
hear it?
university degree in whatever you studied, and you have all the qualifications of a U.S. officer.
Yes.
Okay, we have the same in the Netherlands, actually, schools like that. So, but I'm using the West Point because you know West Point. If I would tell you Breda, you're like, what? So let's use West Point. We know that people going to West Point get a university degree when they're done with their study.
Yeah.
Okay, but most of their curriculum is based on physical activity because they don't only have to be smart, they have to be physically active.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why don't we see this in more universities? It works.
We could get into. I'm sorry. You just actually set off another thought. I'm sorry that just brought me into a tangent, but one of the issues that we're having in American universities, and this is more of a men's issue than a woman's issue, is that they will go out. American universities are making huge bank off of their athletes.
Yes, unfortunately.
So their students are giving them getting a ton of money. They're being horribly used.
Yeah, it's basically slavery, in all fairness.
It's they're not being well treated. It's just, well, I shouldn't say they're not being well treated. They're being given special treatment, but they're not necessarily being given treatment that will ensure long-term success.
They are exploited for their sportsmanships, but they don't get a real education.
Yes. So
this is not the same. That's why I used West Point as an example and not normal universities.
Yeah, but then you sort of said, well, why isn't it like that? And then I was like, well, I'm thinking about this other issue.
Yes, so but that other issue is indeed an issue. Mm-hmm. But what I meant is, why don't we give more physical and mental training to our boys in universities?
Well, I think we should be combining physical and mental training for everybody. I mean, I do
agree.
Because there's a clear, there are clear brain benefits, there are clear behavioral benefits, there are clear health benefits.
But for women, it is not as important than it is for men. Now, don't get me wrong. I totally agree with you that for women it can be a very good thing as well. For boys, it's not so much a good thing as almost necessary.
Mm.
And that's because physiology of a man or of a boy is different than that of a girl. Women are far better at listening, not just hearing what we say, but listening for sounds, looking and recognizing patterns than men are. Mm-hmm. This again is yeah, I almost wanted to say genetically, but maybe genetically isn't the right way to call it. But this is how we evolved as a dimorphic species, because women had certain responsibilities and men had different responsibilities. Both equal, but different. We still see this in men and women on average today. Women, on average, are far less likely to be colorblind than men. I'm not saying there won't be colorblind women, because there sometimes are, but if we look at the amount of colorblind women compared to the amount of colorblind men, this is because men and women are different in this. Women are far better at recognizing emotions than men are. This is, funny enough, one of the reasons why women with autism are often not diagnosed with autism, because men or women that take away the diagnosis of the one with autism don't recognize that autism displays different in women than it does in men.
Right.
And this is, funny enough, one of my expertises. Doesn't matter that they both suffer autism, but from a lot of perspectives, it's not recognized within women. So one could argue that women suffer more from autism than men, because with men it at least gets recognized, and then they try to do something to how do you call it? Educate them in their life. to make their life more balanced. Now, luckily, they're trying to do more and more for women in this as well, but we do see differences between men and women. And in some points, women don't get seen. For example, the example of autism I just gave you. Women
Heart
don't.
disease is another one where,
Yeah.
at least in America, it's not as well recognized.
Yeah, but at the same time, for example, if we look at, if we're going to look at diseases, if we look at something simple as cancer. Cancer is something that both men and women suffer from. On average, men are more likely to get cancer than women do. Yet, funny enough, when we look at cancer research, it's mostly geared towards women. Now, don't get me wrong, I think no one should die of cancer if we can at all prevent it.
Yeah.
But I don't understand why one group is considered more vulnerable to it than another group, when reality shows it's the other way around.
In this case, I think that women, what could I say? They worked on it. They said, all right, we're having this breast cancer problem. Let's go out, let's do this, let's get this, going, let's get the Susan G. Komen Foundation going, let's get this going, let's raise awareness, let's get a pig, so there's work and effort involved. It's kind of like when they had the ALS challenge, right?
Yeah.
ALS is very rare. Yes. It is not a common disease.
Luckily not, no, yes.
Yes, and I am more than happy that they had this huge benefit that got them so much money. I'm thrilled with that. I'm glad. I'm not trying to take away from ALS. But there are other diseases, as you would say, that are more common that people might get that aren't getting that because they didn't come up with the ALS challenge and it didn't hit. And, now we're talking about a lot of things that are, you have to put in work. And I also think that this goes in, I should tell you, God, I feel so stupid for not bringing it up before. I believe it's going to be the same for my Against the Odds group. So there is a hangout, I believe tonight, my tonight, which I don't know what.
Yeah, I probably have to go to bed because I have to wake up early tomorrow, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Listen, I haven't seen your thingy. Just send me a link of it and I'll look into it. And sure, I'm more than willing to contribute to your end of the thing as well.
Right, but there's a man who is trying to put together a bicycle ride all around, I think, Eastern Australia, or is it Western Australia he's doing? I forget, but he's doing a long bike ride to raise awareness, and he contacted us, and so we're going to be on a hangout with him later on today where he's going to talk more about that. So I will try to remember to send you the link to that so that if the people that are watching, that are your viewers, would be interested. I know that he's working very hard on that. And the more that we talk about it, just as you have to talk about breast cancer, I think you have to talk about suicide. You have to talk about male suicide. You have to talk about the need for people to reach out. You need to talk about the need for people to get involved, to watch. And again, men have different signs of being in trouble when it comes to suicide. Yeah. So they present differently. So, and I think sometimes that gets missed as well. So I think the more education you can get, the more you can talk about it, the more you can push it and bring it into people's minds, the better everybody will be.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right.
But the thing is, and I'm seriously going to look into the thingy. I'm really hoping you send me the link because I'm going to look into it. What we see is that when a woman suffers from something, or when women on average are suffering from a certain thing, we see that society is more likely to come to the aid than when men suffer from that same thing?
Well, I'm gonna hope that in this case that society, the men and women and everybody else, all the genders of society, look at the problem that we're seeing in the increase in men's suicide rates, that they can see that this is a major problem that we all should be paying attention to.
True.
So.
No, totally true. I totally agree with you on that.
Mm.
So we don't, though. That's the problem. And the thing is, one of the reasons why we don't look at the men suffering is because we don't want to see the men suffering.
Mm.
And one of the reasons why we do look at the women suffering is because it's not that we want to see the women suffering, but we want to be aware of women that are suffering so that we can change something. And this is something that's ingrained in both men and women. We care about the women.
I don't know, man, because you know what? That's what I keep hearing. But then, God forbid, somebody bring up something like, men taking up too many seats on a train instead of jumping all over.
That's just silly. The whole manspreading thing. Did you see the BuzzFeed video?
Or I don't watch BuzzFeed. That stuff is clickbait nonsense.
Yes, you're completely right on that. I should stop doing that. But no, I mean, there were women trying to manspread on the bus and on the train. And you know how many people actually responded to them on that?
Who?
None. No one responded on them. If you see the women in the train sitting like there's some bull. If a man would sit like that, I would have a problem with it too.
But in any case,
no one responded because the thing is, when there is a problem, men want to confront the problem.
Mm. Well, you know, when women come forward, I mean, all I have seen my whole life is women wanting things that are perfectly reasonable to want and getting crap for it. As a feminist.
Okay. Unfortunately, this is some place where I completely disagree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about, you know, coming forward and saying, we don't want to be sexually harassed at work.
Which was already illegal. There wasn't a time in the Western world where sexually harassing a woman was okay. There never has been that time in the Western world in the last, well, let's say 500 years. I could say more, but same thing.
Yeah, well, it was more okay than it is now. Let's put it that way. It really was. I mean, I was there, so don't tell me it wasn't.
No. What you were there for was something happening, but you could speak out against it. You could. And you could waste your time in a lot of different ways. It wasn't helping. It didn't help for a long time. It was an uphill battle. It was a fight. It's always a fight. But then again, if we look at the fights feminism has picked for the last few, well, let's say decades. What were there? Gender pay gap debunked so many times it's not even funny anymore. Yet still they bring it up.
Yeah, debunked by YouTube goobers, not by economists.
Christine Hofstadter is a YouTube goober.
Well, Christine is a different situation. All right,
she's an economist. But she is an economist. She identifies as a feminist. I don't know why, but fair enough. That's her choice.
She is. I'm not going to get into who pays her and how much money she gets, but it's not. She is on the outside. Okay.
Fair enough.
Even with her, she doesn't say the wage gap isn't real.
Yes, she does.
Because there's a small amount. It's not as big.
About 2%.
Yeah, and she's a biased person. I believe the people who are from Philip Morris also all those scientists seem to think that Smoking
Okay.
can cause cancer for a long time.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's
somebody.
that's not a good example, and I'll tell you why that's not a good example. Because
Because
it's
money doesn't talk and bullshit doesn't walk.
no, that's beyond the. That's not the point. What we're seeing is that on average in our society, if there's a problem, women are the victim, men are the perpetrator. This is the message we are sending out on nearly all subjects.
I'm really getting to the point where I just feel like we're talking in circles and not
We
getting
are.
anywhere.
That is true. But unfortunately, the point is that because this is happening, we can't help men better than we are doing now because we still portray the image that when there's a problem, men did it.
Right. Well, I fundamentally disagree with you on a lot of this, all right? And again, this is why I was saying when I said, going back to my original question, if we sit here and bicker and bicker and bicker and bicker over these things, instead of looking at how can we help this person who's doing this bike ride, how can we put forward this information that needs to be got out there to people,
What we need to do
that
first
is what
be
we
honest.
could do.
What we
That
need
is
to
what
do
we could do.
What the first thing is that we need to do is be honest.
Your honesty is about what you think, but I disagree with you, honestly.
Okay. So let's talk about the honesty of the wage gap thing.
Right.
When Obama said that women still make 80% to a man, 77%, he said. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. That was based on a very rough, unnuanced estimates, and I think it's wrong to even try to put a one number on it, right? Because it's not one number.
But people have been putting a number on it. Economists have researched this, and they come to a number of roughly 2%. So not 88%, or sorry, 77%.
I've heard anywhere from like 2 to 10%. So I'm not going to go and just say 2% because that's the smallest, and you've
fair enough. Fair enough. Let's take the average. Let's take 6%.
All right.
A difference of 6%.
Let's say that.
Even if this is true, that a man and a woman both doing the same job for the same amount of hours are paid different. Well, 6% could be you do it for 5 years, I've done it for 10 years, so that could be the 6% difference. But if all your knowledge and all your factual things are the same as mine, then by law we are to be paid the same.
Okay.
This is in America, right? The Equal Pay Act, 1967 from heart.
I think a lot of this would be fixed by just having more transparency in pays and salaries.
I agree with that. I totally do. But here is my point. How come the president, well, the previous president of the United States says that there is still this problem? He is the president. He is not only a law student and I don't think he's a law professor, but I think he was an attorney at one point. Not 100% sure, but he did study law. And he is the president.
Think he did some. I don't know that if he was ever granted professorship, but he did some. He did some teaching at Harvard as well about constitutional law. Yeah, constitutional law is his.
But he should know law, right?
Correct.
If the president recognizes that there are people being underpaid, then the president recognizes that people are breaking the law.
Yeah.
Why is he not acting on it?
Well, I think he was. I mean, I think that's why he was seeking to make some changes in the law. But of course, he doesn't.
But the law is already there. I mean, the law doesn't need changing.
But the law brings what the law says is that if a woman believes that this has happened, or if it really, if there's this discrimination and she feels that she can prove it, she can bring forward and it can be reviewed and blah, 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 blah. So what he's saying But it doesn't say that the president just gets up and goes out and says, hey, you IBM.
No, he has his people for it. I mean, he can tell the FBI, look into it. He can tell the local police forces, look into it. If you know,
I suppose he could, but I mean,
if you know of someone who committed a murder, all you have to do is go to the police and say, listen, this happened, he did it, look into it. Or she did it, look into it, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, we agree on that. Because a law was broken, the police needs to step in.
I believe that this is more of a tort than a crime, though.
No, actually, it's still a crime because it's a law. And if a law is being broken, it's
they separate it so that it's more of a civil matter. So it's not necessarily. I can't call the cops and say that that I'm being underpaid. You know, I would go to the relevant statutory body or regulatory body.
Fair enough. Who's that then?
That would be the Department of, not the Department of Employment, the Department of I forget the exact name in Massachusetts.
But there is something. There is something.
Yeah, there is something there, definitely.
Okay, how many people have gone there?
I don't know. I could look that up. I know that there have been. I know that people go.
There are a lot of people talking about it, but how many major cases have the USA seen in the last, let's say, 10 years?
The last major case that I knew of was Walmart, and that went belly up. So that was a real problem. And that's where you start to see the problem is that they could prove the damages. They could prove that it was happening. They could prove that, you know, the same people not getting the same treatment. They could prove the gender problem. What they couldn't prove is the damn intention. They couldn't prove what was in people's minds. So that's the problem.
Oh, that's weird though, because the law doesn't say it has to be in your mind. The law basically said same job, same person, same pay. Doesn't it?
When you go for, in America, when you go for some of these kinds of discrimination cases, depending, sometimes you have to prove that it was intentional. We're having the same problem right now in some of our voting issues when it comes to race. So there was a problem, right, where they were putting in new racial laws. Well, not racial laws, I'm sorry. They were putting in new laws about going to the voting booth and going through for voting. And they could prove that it was happening to people of color were getting into trouble more often, that they were prevented from voting, even though they shouldn't have been prevented from voting, because these sorts of laws just so happen to affect them more. So there was a judge in Texas who basically said, well, this is racist. Straight up, it's racist. It went up. The next group of judges says, yes, it's racist. Then it went up again to another judge who said, well, can you prove the malicious intent of the racism? And threw it back down, and it's still sort of going through these silly.
That is weird, because if it's racism, it's racism.
You have to prove the emotion. You have to prove the intention of it, and that is a problem.
Fair enough. So then maybe we shouldn't call it racism, but we should call it inequality. Yeah. Then we take away the emotional value of racism. It's not about racism. It's about some people are being treated unequal than others.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chat, and I usually don't look at the chat. And it seems like a lot of people are having a lot of difficulty with what I'm trying to explain. What is it? Is there somebody there who could maybe, is it just that I'm talking about these sort of legal issues that are silly? Or, I mean, am I just not explaining it well, or is it that I'm talking about legal issues which are generally difficult to talk about anyway?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I can't answer that. Guys, chat, come on. Question is being asked. Answer.
Am I just not, if I'm not, there are problems with the way our law is right now. There are problems with how it is approached, and there are problems with how it's worked out. And again, I think that to some degree, some of these problems we'll have to look at, and we'll have to figure out how to change the laws to make them more equitable for people. But on the other hand, I think that when it comes to the wage gap, the first thing we could do in America is just provide more transparency, because right now we have a culture where everybody hides how much they make. And
I totally agree with that one. I mean, if we look in the Netherlands we have collective job agreements, so to speak, and me and my colleagues, we roughly earn the same. I mean, I might earn a little bit more or a little bit less than my co-worker, but it's purely based on how many years she worked there and how many years I worked there. But other than that, we earn the same.
Yeah. Whereas it's much more of a negotiation, and these are negotiations that are held under in the dark. So I go in not knowing what everybody else is making, but I have to decide how much I'm going to ask my boss to give me, and that's tricky. So
yes, and then in America, they've researched and unfortunately proven that on average women ask for less than men. But at the same time, there is a reason why men ask for more. I won't say that they ask for more than women. I'm just going to say there's a reason why men ask for more. You're laughing, but at the same time, this is an important one. If a man and a woman live together and they get a child, on average, the man goes to work and the woman stays at home. On average. We agree on that?
Yeah, it's more common that
okay.
When there's a stay home.
What happens to the perception a family gets when the woman stays at work and the man stays at home, on average?
I think that there's still stigma about men staying at home. It's better. It is better. I've watched it become better, but it's still there.
There's still a huge stigma. And I do use the word huge in this. And this stigma is part of the problem men face in our current society. So I'm not blaming women for this. I'm not blaming men for this. This is a societal thing, so that both men and women do this. Men get scolded for not spending more time at home because they're working. But if they do stay at home with the kids, they get scolded for staying at home. And there are more examples I can give you, but very often men are in a catch-22. You know the reference, right?
Women are in a, yes, I've read the book. It's a great book. Women find themselves in a lot of catch-22s where this sort of stuff comes to. And I'm
not saying it's only men that find themselves in this. I agree with you that women can find themselves in a catch-22 situation as well.
Yeah, it's tricky. And then when you look at the wage gap and say custody laws, the way that these are handled, a lot of times people in the MRM can see the men's point of view when it comes to the custody, but not the women's point of view when it comes to the wage gap.
But the thing is, the wage gap is already
that these are
addressed by law.
But there's nothing in the law that says men don't get.
Actually, there is. It's called the Duluth model.
What?
The Duluth model. It's basically used for domestic violence.
That's domestic violence. That's different.
But the attitude continues in family court.
In family court, there's nothing that says that one gender is given priority over another. But what happens is men don't ask. Men, only about a third of the time do they ask for custody. A third of the time, roughly, they ask for the woman to get custody. They
Yes.
specifically give it away.
Yeah, there are times that men give it away. I totally agree with you.
And
But if we look
about
at
a
the
third of the time they want it. I mean,
But-
but
no,
almost
they don't win custody a third of the time though.
Well, when they actually go through all the laws and go and push forward, right, and go through it, the courts are actually more fair, but usually it never gets to that. It is only in a very small number of courts that it ever actually goes to court. It's usually decided in
Yes.
mediation
Indeed.
beforehand. And in mediation, men are just they're not asking for it. They're not looking for it to the degree.
That's unfortunately not true. But men often get told that it's not, how do you call it? Suitable is the wrong word. Useful or appropriate for men to ask for custody. So
whether they're told it's appropriate or not, they're not asking for it. And if they're not asking for it, they're not going to get it.
But that's, well,
whatever their idea is, that's the same thing. It is the same. It is the flip side of that coin.
But if that's the same argument that people can use for the, I'm sorry, I am interrupting you on this one, because if that's the same argument people can use for the wage gap thing, then the explanation should be the same as well. Is it something we accept? No, it's not something we accept.
That's what I'm trying to say. If we're not going to accept it, we have to not accept it or accept it across the board instead of acting like
but I agree with that.
Yeah.
But then this is something we should address completely.
Yes.
But we are constantly talking about the wage gap, but we're not talking about unequal parental rights.
Mm.
And it starts earlier, though. I mean, should a woman always have a right to choose for abortion? I'm not a fan of abortion, but I'm not against it either. I wanted to make that clear. I think I mentioned it earlier. I'm against abortion as how do you call it? I can't find the words now. Anti-conceptive. I'm against abortion as anti-conceptive, but other than that, it's not my decision. The thing is, though, a man cannot choose abortion.
Before we get into that question, because that's a whole kettle of fish, but it is getting kind of late. We've been doing this 2 hours now.
Yeah, you're right there. You're right.
And I do have to pick up my little one. So
I know you're right. You said, no, I totally understand, because this is why we did it at a different time than I normally do it.
Right.
I would love to continue this conversation. I do accept certain points you made. Certain points, unfortunately, I do not. But mostly perhaps because we need to dwell on it a bit longer. But when you say inequality is a problem, then I'm in your corner.
And I think maybe you talked about bringing more people on. Maybe if we do this again, and I know how hard I am to schedule.
Oh, yeah, that was
believe me. It was for people in the chat. This poor guy. It kept being like rescheduled and pushed up because I do have 3 kids and it is difficult to schedule around everything else. So, but maybe the next time we could even think about adding more people, because I know you said that there were people that were interested.
Currently in the chat, Carlos is asking, ask her if she's willing to debate me on equality.
I rarely debate. In fact, I almost never debate because, we were talking about this, you and me, before. I prefer to have a conversation and to find out what people think and why people think that the way that they do. And I want, rather than a debate, which I think is set up so that one person achieves victory and the other person doesn't. I think it's a lot of times, especially YouTube debates, they don't go anywhere. They just turn into ponage contests. So that would be my answer.
Well, not you, so I guess not me, but you and some others. So you and some others. Why not me, Carlos? What the fuck? Why not me? Anyway, but yeah, no, I would love to have you back someday, and then we can maybe have Carlos join, and maybe we can have Rin join, because Rin said she really wanted to join as well. I'm sorry, Rin. The conversation went the way it went, and I did actually enjoy this conversation as it was. I didn't feel that we needed more people.
Yeah.
Carlos says, as you did with Tim at Motivator. I have no idea. I can do it.
He needs demotivator, I think. Demotivator opinion. Yes. And maybe we could bring, I'll bring somebody from my side so that.
Yeah, sure. Because I don't think, and I'm sorry, it seems that we didn't address the issue, an open talk about problems men face in our Western society. But to me, I have the feeling we did address it a lot. Because a lot of the problems men face in our Western society end in a higher suicide rate and end in certain mental problems, but they start at inequalities. And this, as I said earlier, this already happens at schools where boys are more likely to be diagnosed ADHD and are given drugs to deal with that, which will hamper their, basically it will hamper their development. And we know it does, but at the same time we don't know it does because it's never been really tested. You can't test the development of a kid.
Yeah, it's very when it comes to, and my son had certain diagnoses. It wasn't ADHD, but I did not let them medicate my son.
No, maybe that was the best choice.
It was.
I work in this line of work, and I'm still saying, well, half of the time, 70% of the time, we medicate kids that shouldn't be getting medication. And it's my work.
Yes. So I don't think that we have the answers on the long term of these sorts of medications that go in and mess with your brain chemistry at a very developmental time. So I just said, if it came to the point where it had to be done, yes. But unless it's necessary, I'm not going to do it. Like, if there's another avenue, I'm going to take the other avenue, even if it's more difficult, even if it's more effort-ridden, because, again, you're talking my way. That's a whole other situation, but.
No, but this is something I agree with you on completely.
Yeah.
Our kids are our future. We shouldn't make them demure with medication because otherwise they're an inconvenience to us.
Right, exactly.
If that's the way we look at our children, then we have a problem.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is something that I do equate to feminism, because this is something that did come from certain forms of feminism. I'm not saying you are that type of feminist, because as I said in our pre-online talk, there are so many different forms of feminism. It's even impossible to keep track of. I mean, there are feminists pro-choice and there are feminists that are pro-life, and they're both feminist. So there is no one feminist.
So I think that one of these days we should definitely get back together and have more of a conversation. Thank you for being patient and having me on.
I will have more facts ready for you too, to be honest, because I falsely brought up certain points that I assumed you would recognize, and some of these things you did not. I should have gotten the proof ready for that. I didn't prepare well for that. But then at the same time, that's okay too, because as I said in the beginning, this is a discussion. This is an open talk. This is not me trying to hit you over the head with facts.
Correct. So that's
something I kind of want to keep doing, in all fairness, because as a problem our societies face, our society is unfortunately gynocentric. And not masculine, as some people like to think. But both men and women suffer from gynocentrism in the same way as people claim they suffer from masculinity. And this is not something women do. This is not something feminists do. This is something we as a society do.
Okay. Well,
feminism is one of the ways that it has become, it manifests itself. But even feminism is not the cause of it, it's a result.
Well, On that note, where obviously we disagree, but that's okay. On that note, I'm going to bid you adieu because I have to run and get my little one. But thank you again.
Can I have one more minute from you? I'm going to go offline and then just a short talk after.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yes. 1 minute.
In that case, I'm going to choose this moment to say thank you very much in the stream for commenting, and we did read it. I'm not too favored about the right-wing talks going on at times, but anyway, thank you very much for joining, and I would like to thank Chrisiousity once again for joining this talk, and I hope that this will be continued. And with that, I'm going to close the stream.